Good to see you all. What is that? All right. TikTok being weird as usual. Okay. There it is. Whew. How has everybody been? I know it's been a little while since I did a live. Figured I'd jump on this Friday. All right, everything look good. Double checking that everything looks good. All right, looks good to me. All right, looks good. All right. YouTube, you guys looking good? Yes. All right. Looking good on TikTok. Okay. All right, all is well. So, how is everybody doing? All right. TikTok, y'all doing all right? YouTube, y'all doing all right? Solid, solid, solid. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm not doing the lives as much anymore. I'm more doing the little shows. There's going to be a couple episodes dropping, I think, on Monday. So next week, there should be 3 other episodes coming out. So keep your eyes peeled on YouTube for that. But yeah, man, doing our thing. Seen a whole bunch of talk about financial freedom and how we pulled that off. And for some folks, the corporate freedom as well. But we did it the same way, right? So it's typically, the bond ladder. Now the structures change from time to time, but the engine of all the structures has been the bond ladder. So for a lot of the cats that are like, I don't have a work from home job, I don't have, these things that people are talking about that allow them to move to other countries. So how are you doing it? Most people know that I never really did a work from home job either. The bond ladder becomes the engine for that. So the bond ladder, for us, our targets as a company are always 10%, 10 years. No one has actually gotten just 10 years though, and no one has actually gotten just 10%. Typically, the lowest is 12%, as you guys saw, with some of the end of year results from some of the previous years. But like for us, we have 20 years, right? And it's just in the stuff that we chose, right? And the people who were getting their bond ladders the same time we were getting our bond ladders, they also have 20 years. Not like we did a special program for ourselves, right? So it just depends on when those people come in, when they get their ladders going. But for 20 years, the government is going to have to pay us every single month, at least 10%. Like for us, I think that our overall average is, I think it's 16.5%. Um, and the lowest percentage that we get is 12%, right? And again, everybody who came on board when we were getting ours has the exact same, pattern as us. So that's the way you do it. It's not super sexy because it's not super difficult. It's just a currency exchange situation, right? If you had the amount of money you have in the currency exchange, like when you do the currency exchange, you have 8 million ish local currency. So now, if you're in America, think about having $8 million. Could you quit your job? Yes. Right? Like obviously, you could quit your job and you could live off the interest of that $8 million, right? So it's the same thing. What ends up happening is it's just a currency exchange. So you're able to do it, with way less money that you might actually have access to already, instead of trying to wait till you're 65 and seeing if you have $8 million then. That's it. It's super super simple, right? So the plan that was already in your head for like retirement, it's the same plan. It just jump starts it by changing currencies. That's all. You know what? I hear that a lot, and I'm starting to kind of call it out when I see that question, um, because then I think you're part of a different conversation, which is okay, right? Because we have our generational wealth people who just invest and then they leave that money there to build for investments. It's not really what we're talking about right now, right? But the whole what about the US dollar thing indicates to me that you're not relocating. And what we're talking about right now is relocating people, right? So the people who are relocating, they get to quit their job and live essentially high on the horse or high on the hog, whichever one you prefer. I'm from the north, so horse comes to mind first. I know you Southerners go with the hog, but live the good life or the soft life or whatever for the next 20 years because you yourself are actually living there also. But if you're trying to now like stay in New York City, for example, and then make this investment, will you still make more than you would have made in yes. Can you live off of it? No. Right? So even if you if you lived in New York and you had I don't know, $500,000 or something, and you were getting 10% on a $500,000 or even $1 million, you probably couldn't just quit your job and just live in New York off of that 10%. You know what I mean? And again, that's before taxes. That's your gross. It's 10%, right? So you probably couldn't. So it's the same type of deal. So if you're asking about, well, what about the exchange rate? Going back to, okay, so that indicates that you're not looking at the relocation aspect of it. Because yeah, you still will make more, but obviously the buying power goes back the other way if you bring it back, to the United States suspended. So the folks that get to just retire essentially immediately are the folks that are relocating, right? So that's a key cog in the plan. So we have, like I said, we have 20 years, but you can duplicate it as many times as you can afford to duplicate it, right? Most people have what it takes, in money that they were like saving for a house, which works really, really well for our clients because a lot of them, they do a package where they get a house, right? And the money they were saving for the house was just for the down payment, right? It wasn't money to buy the house cash. So what ends up happening is they can actually get a house and the bond ladder, right? And then when they do the relocation, they're good. Like they don't have to work anymore. And especially if it's multiple parties and they can do multiple bond ladders, that's really key. And a lot of folks, they just get there with it because they'll get the first bond ladder and see that it works, but maybe it's tight, right? Sometimes that happens depending on the bonds. Like, yeah, you get what was promised, but you're like, I didn't realize I am a little bit bougie and I do like to spend a little bit more and da 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 da. So I'm like spending almost all of it every single month type of thing. You're still good, but maybe you want a little bit more. And so those folks will typically either get another ladder or they'll get somebody another ladder. A lot of it ends up being, family units. And so they do a ladder, but then there are, bags and shopping and this and that and the third. So what'll end up happening is they'll do an additional ladder for the wife. And it'll be like the wife's allowance type of thing. You know what I mean? Where it just comes directly to her. Nobody else touches it. Like, it just is what it is. And it goes from there, right? And so your subsequent ladders don't have to be as much, right? The ladder that covers you on your household expenses covers you on the household expenses. But if you want like a spending money ladder, it doesn't have to be the same amount of money as the ladder that's covering you on your household expenses, right? So additional ladders don't have to be the same amount of money as as we call it, the prime ladder. The prime ladder makes sure that you never have to work again, right? Additional ladders don't necessarily have to do that, and they can serve like flimsy purposes, like just go spend. Every time you get this, go burn it. You know what I mean? Because our bills are taken care of, and you like to spend. So go get a new bag or new shoes or like whatever, right? We see that a lot, right? And then there are people who like get ladders for their kids. Those are beautiful things, right? Especially if the kids are babies, it becomes a beautiful thing because now you might as well just do a generational wealth trust and start it with the baby's ladder and call it a day, right? But people typically they won't just stop at one ladder. Even if they have no additional income, which we always recommend you go find some. But even if you have no additional income, what will typically start happening once you're used to like what your means are is you're able to live below them, right? Because you already own the house outright, right? So your house is owned outright. The people who get that package, you can obviously do it without owning the house. But You own the house outright typically, and then you have this monthly income coming in that covers, all your bills because there aren't much bills to begin with, right? You don't necessarily have to have an electric bill because you could be off grid with solar, um, and you don't have a water bill because you have your own well. You don't have a sewage bill because you have your own bioreactor, right? So your bills are negligible anyway, which is why it works so well. But those folks, they'll come in and they'll eventually be like, all right, cool. I'm spending 30,000 a month. I'm making 50,000 plus a month, right? So I'm spending 30,000 a month. I'm making 50,000 plus. I got a 20,000 overflow. Um, and then eventually that gets them to a place where they can go ahead and reinvest in something else. The only kind of downside to it is the time limitation, right? We expect that after 2027, the rates of return are going to plummet, right? So right now people are getting 13.5%, 14%. Even the biggest one that came out was 18.46%, right? So that was huge. Um, but after the next election, we believe, complete speculation, right? But we believe that the rates will go back down to like what American rates are, which is like 4%, 5%, 7 at the most, right? So at 7%, it's not as easy to put up enough money to live off of, right? If you're getting 4%, it's even harder, right? Which is, what a typical bond might get you in a developed nation, right? So, being that it's a bond and it's considered to be one of the safest classes of investment, the safer the investment class, the lower the ROI, right? The riskier the investment class, the higher the ROI, right? The potential ROI you can lose, right? Um, which would give you no ROI. So that's how investments work. So in a developing nation, typically a tier two nation, like Kenya, as they're moving from tier two to tier one, that's where you get these big giant ROI situations where you can get more ROI than the standard ROI on the S&P 500, right? There's a historical growth on the S&P 500 is right around 10%. So if you can get 12% on a bond, right, versus the 10% up and down, up and down, up and down, average on the S&P 500, then you're doing good, right? So that's essentially what it is. It's not super complicated. It's not, I know people like to make things sound more complicated than they are so that they make themselves sound like there's some genius that you need to hire to fix your life. But that's just not the case. It's not super complicated. It's just strategic, right? You just have to do it in such a strategic way that it automatically sets you up for the next 10, 20, even 30 years. The maximum bond maturity in Kenya is 30 years. So technically now you'd be finagling some stuff to get all the bonds on your bond ladder to all be the same maturity, but it is technically possible that you would have a 30-year maturity. I would think that the only way to do that right now would be the secondary market, which essentially makes it impossible when you think about that, right? Because if it's secondary market, that means it's an old bond. Like you're buying someone else's bond who doesn't want to stay in for the entire maturity. So part of that maturity is already gone. So you could have all 30-year bonds, but you wouldn't have 30 years left, all right? Um, but yeah, technically you could have a 30-year threshold. For us, it's more realistic to that you could get a 20-year threshold, and we target 10. So we give ourselves a pretty decent window, as far as managing expectations are concerned. So people are normally pretty really happy with what they get. They always get more ROI than was promised. They always typically get more years than was promised. There are some folks that actually got 10 years. That was what, 2004, 2004. Yeah, 2004 ladders, the second ladder. That one is exactly 10 years. So, it is what it is. Yeah, but definitely over 10%. Yep. Yep. They haven't dropped to 10% yet. That'll be like our early warning sign. When we start seeing actual 10%, then it'll be like, ugh, all right, it's slowing down, you know. But there's always been talkers and actors, man. There's always been talkers and actors. So there's always people who get it. They'll talk about how great it is and whatever, but they just won't act on it. And then they'll miss it. Yeah. So on the business side, yeah, you can do the same thing, and it's helpful. It's very helpful to do a business ladder, because if you do, then you don't actually need clients, right? Like your business made an investment that's paying every month, and you know that those monthly payments can pay staff, right? So eventually you are, right? Consistency is just going to get you business anyway. But what it allows you to do is not deal with people who are not your target client. So if you get somebody who's going to be a pain in the ass, you don't need them, right? Because you got the bond ladder sitting in your business, paying your business every month with or without them. You also can't be canceled, right? Doesn't matter whether they don't like you. Doesn't matter whether they want to boycott you. Doesn't matter whether they want to take your business to one on Google. Who cares? You got bonds paying your business every single month, whether you have a client or not, right? So if it's something that you want to be open, if it's a business that you want to keep open regardless, and then if you have that kind of staying power, it doesn't matter what people think about you, right? Like all of the scandals with the biggest companies you know of that have happened where those companies are still around, it's because they had the monetary staying power. So it doesn't matter if they're boycotted, doesn't matter if they're canceled, doesn't matter if every single client like leaves, it just doesn't matter. And then eventually, just because they're consistent and they're there, people start using them again, right? So like think Target, you know, like it was a great idea, but is Target gone? No, they're still right there, right? So it's one of those things where it gives you the freedom to, follow your dream in the way that you want to follow it. It allows you to still make an impact in someone else's life, because typically you would set up a bond that would be enough to cover the employees, right? So whoever's working for you, whether you want to tell them this or not is a different live, but you have the ability to pay them whether you have clients or not. So that's helpful, right? And then you're able to just be consistent with what it is that you wanted to present, right? So it's interesting. It creates a different dynamic. It works better for specialists, right? Doesn't really work too well for generalists. Generalists really need to listen to the market. Specialists don't. Like specialists do not need to listen to the market, right? So, it works way better for specialists who need the market to listen to them, right? Like people don't need to be telling brain surgeons how to do brain surgery. Brain surgeons don't need to listen to the market, right? Their target clients need to listen to them or else they die, right? So that's a specialist. Like that, that's an extreme specialist, but that's still a specialist. That's how specialists work. So anytime you seek out a specialist, they're not supposed to obey you. If you seek out a specialist and they just obey you, you need to fire them. That's not what specialists are supposed to do, right? Specialists are supposed to tell you what you need to do to get the outcomes that you want, right? So another version that's not as extreme as like a specialist is like a college professor. You pay for college. College doesn't pay you, right? And I'm not talking about people in a PhD program. That's different, right? But typically you pay for college. College doesn't pay you. That doesn't mean that you can go into Econ 101 and tell the professor, you work for me, and you're going to teach from page 16 of the book. How well is that going to go for you, right? That you're going to get kicked out of the class, whether you pay for it or not, because your professor's a specialist. He doesn't listen to the market. The market listens to him, even if they pay him, right? So when you're a specialist, that's when you can use, that strategy, and then make sure that your firm is funded with or without clients and with or without customers, and then you do what you know you're supposed to do because you're a specialist. You don't care what anybody thinks about it. You don't care what they got to say about it. You don't care about, their TikTok opinions. You only follow the data as a specialist, and you do what needs to be done, period, right? So if you're a generalist, which there's nothing wrong with being a generalist, but if you're a generalist, you have to listen to the market. Like that's how general business works. So if you're a generalist, then you can't, well, I mean, I suppose you could, but you would just have an empty business that has an income stream coming in. So it's just being propped up essentially, right? But if you're a specialist, then it makes all the sense in the world to actually have a passive income stream where you can do what you want to do. Like my very, very first company I was a specialist, I suppose by choice. I could have been a generalist, right? So my very, very, very first company was retail martial arts. I could have been what we refer to in the industry as a McDojo, right? So like a McDonald's style, like, Burger King style, have it your way style, you can buy a black belt here, it doesn't really mean anything style situation. That would have been a martial arts generalist, right? And that would have been different. Now I got to do what the market wants. So if the market says they want little kids to get a black belt within 12 months, if mommy and daddy wants that and they're willing to pay me, extra for it, that's a generalized kind of martial arts, school. We were purists, right? I had went to China and learned real Chinese kung fu and all of that. So I was very much a purist about the way that I taught the martial arts. All right. And a lot of people didn't like it, right? A lot of kids didn't like it because it was wax on, wax off type of stuff, right? You got to do this one thing 10,000 times until you build the muscle memory to move to the next thing. Like it's not a daycare, right? And so I had way less clients, but I had clients that stayed longer because they understood. They weren't about to tell me how to break tradition and do some, McDojo nonsense where we were traditionalists and specialists at what we did. So it's one of those things where there are some industries where you can be both within the same industry, and there are other industries like law where you cannot, right? Anyone in law is a specialist, right? And obviously half of what we do, well, probably 2/3 of what we do is law, which is why we bought a law firm to do it, right? So anyone in law is a specialist. Anyone in medicine is a specialist. Anyone in higher education is a specialist. Not all education is specialists, some is generalists. But anyone in higher education is a specialist, right? So these are people that you go to and they tell you what to do. You don't get to say, well, I pay you, I'm your boss, and tell them what to do, right? So there's a very, kind of black and white divide there. So if you're a specialist, it's incredibly helpful if you can, run your firm in a place where you actually don't need any clients, right? Where you can run your firm, where you have passive income coming in and you don't need anything from anyone. That's why there's a lot of law firms that are landlords. There's a ton of law firms that will have multi-unit apartment buildings as investments. And so if they have absolutely no law clients whatsoever, it doesn't matter. They make $1 million a year in real estate, right? That's super important for specialists. And so here, somebody who wanted to use a bond ladder to prop up their business versus prop up themselves, that's fine too. That makes all the sense in the world, especially if they are specialists. Are there any generalists that it would work? Yeah. If you're a real estate generalist, then that would work, right? Because then what you're doing is you're creating a baseline to take care of the property, right? So if you're a real estate generalist, it could work, right? So in that case, let's say you have a bond ladder going and you're a real estate generalist. So you have the cleaning lady who comes in and like changes the sheets when you have guests and all of that, right? But if there's no guests, what are you going to do? Let dust build up in your place and like have your place not be fresh when a guest does arrive, right? So you're still going to have that cleaning lady come over like twice a week at least, make sure roaches aren't, building up or whatever the case might be, right? So you've got somebody doing that, probably got on-site security. If there's a pool, there's a pool cleaner that's come in once a week or whatever, once every 2 weeks, whatever the case might be. You might have landscaping, you have an electric bill possibly, things of that nature, right? So if you have a bond ladder that's kicking in X amount of dollars, every month, and you have no tenants, so to speak, right, or no short-term stays or whatever it is you're doing, whether it's short-term, mid-term, long-term, that could work. And you're a generalist, right? So, landlords are not specialists. You don't pay a landlord and then they tell you how to live your life or how to live in their house. You know what I mean? So they're not specialists in that regard where like you're paying them to tell you what to do. So they're generalists, but having that bond ladder could work for them as well because they may have paper on the business, right? So if they have paper on the business, like a mortgage or whatever on the business, then it makes sense for them for there to be a cash flow that's coming in that covers that regardless as to whether there are tenants or not, right? That's interesting. AI company can pay me for it if they want it. I'll read a book. How's a bond ladder work? A bond, okay, so a bond, no matter what kind of bond it is, right? So there are private bonds and public bonds. We are talking about public bonds. Private bonds are riskier. But in either case, a bond, excuse me, a bond turns you into a bank. That's the easiest way to explain it, and it's accurate. Right? Most easy explanations are not accurate. That's the easiest way to explain it, and it happens to be accurate. Right? So what ends up happening is a bond is whoever it is that's issuing the bond is taking a loan from you, and they're essentially pre-negotiating their own interest rate, right? So, for example, the IFB 124 8.5, right? If you IFB1 slash 2024 slash 8.5, if you Google that and the word Kenya maybe, you would see a bond pop up. And that bond paid 18.46% interest. It actually just paid us. It pays every February and August, right? So we just got that check from the government, right? And so that's a huge amount. That's like double the S&P 500, right? So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And the IFB part means it's an infrastructure bond. So because an infrastructure bond, that means it's tax exempt. So double the ROI of the S&P 500 and tax exempt. Beautiful situation, right? All right. So, what ends up happening, with that is the government took a loan, and they said, hey, if you give us the money that we want to loan, we're going to pay you back the amount of the loan, just like any other loan, right? You got to pay back the amount of the loan and the interest. In this case, the interest is 18.46%, right? That's like somebody who got bad credit in the U.S., like paying 18% interest, 18 plus percent interest. It's like credit card interest with somebody who got a bad credit score, getting a credit card. So that's a beautiful deal for the person who made the loan, which is you, because you bought the bond, right? So now that particular bond, the only thing with most bonds is they don't pay out monthly like a credit card would or like a mortgage would, whatever, right? So they either pay out annually or biannually. Now there are some jurisdictions like Seychelles, for example, does have monthly payouts, so they do pay the same way you would pay a mortgage, right? So you can find jurisdictions that do that, but most jurisdictions pay either annually or biannually. This is a biannual jurisdiction. So that's why you need a ladder, right? So the ladder sets you up that with the 6 rungs of a ladder, it pays biannually, right? So what's 2 times 6? 12, right? 12 months in a year. So if you strategically ladder those bonds, you get a payment every month of the year, right? And so that's why the bond ladder matters, and that's why people can use it for that, okay? So where are you going? Okay. Don't touch your phone. All right, so that's how that works. That's why a ladder is necessary. Okay, but don't touch the wires. And don't touch your phone. Yeah, you can go. How's it going, Abel? How's it going, Bella? Yeah. It doesn't matter what you like. You're buying it for the business or for yourself, right? It doesn't matter what you buy it for. It'll still pay out the same way. If that's your focus, then just do it for you, and then do owner's capital into the business. Like if you're doing a business runway ladder and you're worried about how you're going to personally get the money, then don't do it. Do a personal bond ladder And then if you're the owner of the business, you have the right to put owner's capital in, and then the business can even have to pay you back. It could be a loan to the business, right? So you could essentially create your own bond. And you could say, I'm putting in this owner's capital, and I'm doing it at this interest rate. The business is going to pay me back at this interest rate later. And if you did mirror bond rates, then it would be pretty hard for tax authorities to tell you that the rate you put in was an arm's length deal, or or you were self dealing, the rate's too high. If you can show them that, oh, wait a minute, had I bought this bond from the government, that's the rate that the government was paying, so why can't my company pay me that? Obviously you're good to go there. So yeah, if your concern is you, then I wouldn't do a business ladder. If your concern is your business, those are the people who do business ladders. Nah, you just don't think that way. We got plenty of people who do that. Plenty of people who do that. People who run businesses know that businesses nickel and dime you for the first at least 2 years. Something goes wrong that wasn't part of the business plan. Something goes wrong that you didn't plan for, especially real estate. There's a leak in the roof. A pipe bursts under the sink. There's a backup in the toilet system, and you got to go do a snake. And some tree's roots broke through the pipes of the septic system, and now you got to replace the entire septic. Shit happens, right? Anyone who's run a real business, where it's not like some online thing where you don't have any actual overhead and there's no actual employees, knows that business is going to nickel and dime you for the first couple of years until you get everything solid. So it makes sense for them to have a backup funding source independent of whatever external success or failure they might be having, that's going to keep that business going, especially if that business is supposed to generate generational wealth. So it's just a mentality thing. It doesn't fit your mentality, that's cool, but that doesn't mean nobody would do it. It just means you won't do it. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. It'll keep that company from failing, especially if you got like 10 years, right? Like if you got 10 years of bond payments coming in every month for you know, for the decade, then you're definitely solid. Like you would have to be a drunk or a gambler or something to mess that up. Yeah. Now, well, our target's 10 years, right? So our target is 10 years. Most people get a little bit more. There was one group that got less though. And that was, what was it? It was the 2024. In 2024, there was either 3 or 4 IFBs, which is a beautiful thing. IFBs are those tax exempt ones, right? And so in 2024, the big boy IFB, the one that just paid out, it's an 8.5 year bond, but it's tax exempt and it's 18.46%. So, of course, you do that. And then there was one in January as well. Where's the other one? It was January, February, and then maybe April was another IFB as well, right? And so IFBs are typically shorter because you get so much better, interest. So your interest rate is so much better. So those guys, theirs is, I think it's it's 8.5 years, and a lot of them, what they did was they just bought February, another February bond, and they didn't have to buy like as much because it was like supplementary. But they were getting such a good deal on that 18.46%, such a great deal. Can you still get it? You're not guaranteed it. We can try to get it for you, but we can't guarantee it to you because in order for you to get it, you have to get it from the secondary market. And in order to get it from the secondary market, it means somebody who bought it in the first place is having some kind of financial difficulty where they have to take their bond to the secondary market to sell it. because you don't get the money back that you put in originally until the end, right? So up until the end of the maturity, you're getting the interest. You're getting paid the interest every, payment cycle. So every year you get that 18.46% on whatever you put in. At the end of the 8.5 years, you get what you put in back on top of all of that, right? So like I said, it's you're now the bank, right? So you're getting the principal plus the interest the whole way through. So if I don't know, somebody gets sick, you know what I mean, and you need your money now, and there's 6 more years till maturity. The only way to get that money now is to go to the secondary market. So when you go to the secondary market, okay. So now when you go to the second, you typically take a haircut, right? Because you're going to the secondary market. And then on the secondary market, people can go there and buy bonds that aren't actually available because you're trying to sell bonds that you own to get cash now, right? So if somebody has, and that's the best bond that like has come out in decades. So somebody would have to have an emergency. They would have to decide like, okay, I need money now. And so I'm going to go ahead and sell, this bond on the secondary market. And then by doing that, you would be able to pick it up. But obviously, it goes quickly, right? It's double the S&P 500. Everybody wants it, right? So as soon as it hits the secondary market, it's gone. So the only people who get that, there has been a couple of clients that got it, but you got to be all in on it. Like, if you want it, you got to make the order, you got to put money up, and then the instant it comes on the market, our brokers got to grab it, and get it for you because everybody wants that bond. Yeah, I mean, on a million local currency, right? Not $1 million, right? But on a million local currency, it pays out almost 100,000. It's crazy. It's crazy. And remember, it's twice a year, right? So it's almost 200,000 for your annual payment, right? So yeah, crazy, crazy, crazy. Right, and it's tax exempt. Right, right, right. So it brings up your average as well. Like those guys in 2024 have crazy bond ladder averages because they have three tax exempt bonds on the same ladder. So like their average, like your standard average ROI of all your ladders is like 13 and a half, somewhere between 13 and a half and like 14 and a half, maybe 15, right? Their average is like 16, 16.9 or something like that because they got three tax exempt bonds on the same ladder. So they had a really good haul. Yeah, it's not terribly difficult. You just have to have access. You know what I mean? Like people come through us to gain access, but it's not difficult to understand, which means it's not difficult to research. So that's great. Which also allows us to kind of like filter through fluff very easily, right? So because it's not difficult to research, like people can research it in 30 minutes with Google, right? And then they're either going to do it or they're not. Right? So it's one of those things where like it becomes really, really easy for us to filter through people who are all talk versus people who are like actually trying to get it done because it's not difficult to understand, it's not difficult to research, it's not difficult to verify. Like there are no questions. You either you want the freedom or you don't. That's it. Mm-mm. That is not true. Try to verify derivatives. Like somebody who's trying to sell you on derivatives trading or something like that. That is difficult and complicated and hard to even understand what it is you're trading to begin with. Like try to like do that on options. You need like a week of research to even figure out what a call or a put is and like how they work. Like, it's not always. It's definitely not always simple to figure out. Absolutely not. But or dividends, bonds are designed to be simple because it's government and or companies, right? If it's a private bond or a public bond, but I'll just take the government since we're talking about treasury bonds and government bonds. The government needs you to understand what you're buying. You know what I mean? Because they need that money. They can't afford for you to be confused, and so because you're confused, you don't buy. So it's super super simple, right? When you see a prospectus from the government on these, the prospectus is like 2 pages long. Right? Like it's not like if you get a prospectus on like a real estate syndication, that thing is like 90 pages long. Like you need a lawyer to interpret it, right? Not bonds, right? Because bonds are they need the public to give them the money, like U.S. Savings bonds and Treasury bonds and all that. That's why old folks buy them all the time. It's so easy to understand, and they make it that way on purpose because they need the average person to buy them, right? So that's one of those things where it just doesn't take very long to understand what you're dealing with and be very confident with it, and then just make a decision, right? So if there's somebody like playing games and we're talking to them too long, we'll just be like, all right, we don't think we're the right firm for you because it doesn't make any sense. Correct. And if you have a company bond ladder, then you actually don't need the clients to keep your company open. So you don't have to, deal with pain in the ass clients. That changed. Like our turnover used to be so horrible. The ability to have a bond ladder support your business so that you don't need clients changed our turnover. Like we haven't had anyone quit in years. Because we quit bad clients instead. Like we don't need their money anymore. So like yeah, back to what was asked before by Bella. Yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure if you're a specialist and you can swing it. Yeah, definitely throw a bond ladder in there. Let the bond ladder hold the business open. That's like a specialized product, which I understand where you could confuse the two. I get that. Um, and it works. It does work. But you still got to listen to your client. You just have to, hey, what's going on, problem chart? You just have to listen to a specific client, right? So, Apple, for example, Poa, Apple only listens to its target client, period. Anyone who buys their phone that is not their target client is a bonus. They only advertise to their target client. They only make modifications to the phone to their target client. They only make design aesthetic changes to their target client. They could care less what you think, even if you're going to buy an iPhone, if you're not their target client. So they have a specialized client, and then everybody else is kind of like whatever, right? So it's like a bonus if those other people come in, right? So you could do that as well, and it could kind of keep you afloat until you like really locked in that niche client. Because Apple obviously had a whole lot of money before the iPhone, so it allowed them to, make the iPhone a specialized product because they didn't need iPhone sales to keep Apple alive at that point. You know what I mean? You moving forward with the iPhone. So because the Macintosh was so successful up until that point and all of that, they were already multi-million dollar company, and now they're pushing this product and they want to niche in, and the rest of the company was essentially the bond ladder for the company, right? The rest of the company was making enough income to keep the company alive, whether people like their phones or not, right? And so it will be the same thing. It's just that you're using the bonds to do it instead. But yeah, you could do that. But it's not a specialist. That was that whole thing where like some generalists can do it as well. That would be a really good example of another type of generalist that can do it. A generalist with a specialized client is not a specialist. They're just a generalist that's niching down. How do you know the difference? I'm assuming between a generalist and a specialist. So I had explained it earlier, but what the easiest way, right, is a specialist takes your money and then tells you what to do. A generalist takes your money and you tell them what to do. So think brain surgeon. You can't just walk up to a brain surgeon, pay them, and be like, now do brain surgery on me. He's going to be like, I need an MRI. Go take a CAT scan. Let me get these labs done. Let's see your blood work. And then after that, I will tell you whether I'm doing brain surgery on you or not. and you'll pay me and like it. Right? Like that's a specialist, right? And like you feel good about it. Like you're not supposed to tell them what to do and they just do it, right? So that's a specialist. That's the easiest way to figure out the difference. If they're supposed to do what you tell them to do, they're a generalist. If you're supposed to do what they tell you to do, even though you're paying them, they're a specialist. Right? Customer's always right. They're a generalist, right? Technically, quite frankly, because you use that, analogy, typically with the specialist, all of your clients are wrong. That's why they're there to see you. Right? Like they wouldn't be doing business with you if they were right. So typically, if you're a specialist, all your clients are wrong, or at least lacking, right? So like if you had the education, you wouldn't be in the school, right? Or you wouldn't be in the classes. And some people are like, oh no, you need the degree. There's something called opting out. You guys know that, right? Like if you literally have the education and you know the thing, you can literally pay for the class, take the final exam, and move on. You do not have to go to the class, right? So, if you know the thing, then you typically don't need the specialist. You need the specialist because you don't know or can't do the thing, right? So if you have a headache, you don't know why you have a headache, you go to a head doctor. What I mean? The head doctor runs a scan, it's like, oop, got a tumor in there. Now you still don't know how to get the tumor out. You got to go to the surgeon and get you see what I'm saying? Like typically if it's a specialist, it's something that you can't do for you or don't know how to do for you. If it's a generalist, you probably can do it, but they're saving you time, right? So then it's a convenient situation. And then they got to do what you tell them to do because you actually know what you're talking about, right? So you're telling them what to do and you're right. So then, it's a generalist. That's just the easiest way. Like if you're trying to figure it out, you're dealing with somebody, you're trying to figure out what they are. Are they telling you what to do or are you telling them what to do? That's essentially it. So as you can see, not one isn't better than the other. A lot of times people think like, oh, specialists are better than that's not true, right? They're just different. That's all. No, that's leverage. Just because you don't tell the chef how to cook your food, that's because he's cooking your food. You don't mess with people who are cooking your food. That's just leverage. That's But yeah, no, because if you're a generalist and you want the customer to be the marker of your business. So if you're a generalist, you want to listen and respond to the market, right? If you're a specialist, then you don't care, right? Right. So for example, the who is it? I want to say it's like CHOP or something, one of the big, 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 big children's hospitals, right? Who have been working on children for years. All, like I said, all medical are specialists. They're not listening to the CDC currently when it comes to children, right? They're taking the American Association of Pediatrics advice when it comes to children and like vaccine schedules right now, right? So they are not listening to the market, whether half the market is, backing, the current, whatever, attorney general or, whatever the case may be, not the attorney general, the, whatever, the, Secretary Kennedy, right? The Secretary of, I can't even think, Health and Human Services. They're not backing the Secretary of Health and Human Services because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about from their point of view because they're specialists and they've been doing this forever, right? So they're not backing the government agency, even though one could say that that was their client or at least represented their clients, right? They don't care. And they don't care if they're canceled for it. And they don't care if you now let your kids die at home because you don't want to, they don't care. They're specialists. They tell you what to do and you do it, or don't come see them, right? And so that's the difference. Like a specialist is never going to listen to the market. Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yep, yep, yep. Like you can not go see them, but it won't matter. Yeah, it typically doesn't matter because they're right. That's what it typically boils down to. So you can decide that you're not going to go see them. However, right, either the people who are in critical situations are just going to die, right, because they're in critical situations and you're being pigheaded, or you're going to like take a step back and be like, oh, yeah, like dad just had a heart attack. Probably should go see that specialist and save his life, right? So it's going to be one or the other, right? So it essentially doesn't matter. Right. Medical is the most extreme. You're right. Medical is the most extreme version of it. It could also be education where like, yes, people aren't going to die, but then you're just all dumb. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to listen to the professor, but you know, you're not getting a refund and you're just dumb at that point. You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things where like once you step into that realm, it really, really doesn't matter how people feel about specializations. The specialist is right by virtue of being the specialist and doesn't care what the majority have to say about it. Right, law's the same way. You're not going to hurt your lawyer by not hiring your lawyer, right? Like their pocket might hurt, but they can go do whatever else. You're the one who's going to hurt by losing in court and going to prison for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? If those are the scales that you're dealing with in that moment, or losing a lawsuit and have to pay out whatever, like it's not going to hurt him that you want to tell him what to do and not listen to him. It's going to hurt you. That's what happens when you defy specialists. You cut off your nose to spite your face. Oh, we see it all the time, right? Because we bought a law firm, so we see it all the time. Luckily, we don't have to like we can just drop those clients and let them go find out in real time, right? But we get people who call us from deportation, who call us from jail because they did something that we told them not to do. We just recently had somebody who was being pigheaded about a trust fund, and we were like, "We're not the right company for you. Go do your trust with somebody else." He found some idiot online who would do the trust for him, and within a year, the IRS was on him. Immediately, the IRS was on him. And so now he has a $10,000 fine for not reporting his offshore account. He has another, I think it's like another $50,000 for failing to do a FinCEN report. He is not being recognized as a non-grantor trust, which is what we provided, which is what he was coming to us for. But he kept trying to break the rules and thinking that little word games would save him. And we were telling him, no, it's form versus function. The IRS will look right through your bullshit and you will have a problem. So now he's calling us to clean it up. We can't clean it up after the fact. You already broke the law. Right. So that's what it is. That's what happens. When you're dealing with the specialist and you don't listen to the specialist, rude. That's it. Sometimes it's more extreme than others, but you always lose. Not my ambulances. I don't own any ambulances. Yeah, I mean, you can start whatever you want, as long as you have the expertise and you want to do your thing, you can start whatever you want. But I would definitely check because there are multiple ambulatory service companies. So I would find a target market because they're not all what you described there. Ambulances, ambulatory services, ambulance. I couldn't say what the best was. That would be me lying. The best that I've encountered would have been Kisumu. Kisumu has really nice ambulatory services. I think they've all come from like the UK because they're like those London ambulances with like the checkered things on the side. I don't see them anywhere else in the country. And then down here, I'm in Diani. They have French ambulances that were like donated, like brand new, like not donated used ones, but they were donated from the French embassy. And then the French embassy, I think, did like a $70 million grant. It wasn't even like a loan or an investment. They did like a $70 million grant into one of the private hospitals out here. So that private hospital is really hooked up as well. Um, so it'd probably be pretty dumb to try and compete with them when they got a free $70 million and have state of the art French ambulances, right? So you just, I mean, you got to look at who you're going to compete with and where, right? Like maybe if you go to like Watamu or something where maybe they don't have any ambulances, you know what I mean? So it just depends on where you're going and what facts you're using, not assumptions, right? Assumptions will kill you in business quicker than anything else. All right. Always facts. Always get your data together, figure out what's going on in the area and have your facts together and then work off the data. The data matter more than anything else. Especially in international business, right? Because you can't work off a culture if it's an international business. You don't know the culture. And if you think you do, hire somebody else to run the business at that point, right? So, like, no matter which country, we've been doing this for over a decade, and when we start working, with other countries, we never make the assumption that we understand the culture, no matter how many locals are with us. We run into that problem as well. We had a pharmaceutical manufacturing company that hired us to put them into Africa somewhere, right? They didn't have a specific place at first. Two of the owners of the pharmaceutical manufacturing company were Nigerian, born in Nigeria, not like Nigerian Americans and they were born in America, but their parents were Nigerian. No, they were both born in Nigeria. They could not make the deal happen in Nigeria. They couldn't make it happen in their own country. And that's one of those things where you would think like, oh, we understand the culture because half of our team is from the culture. No, they've been gone for 10 years. They don't understand the culture themselves anymore. Right. So anytime you're doing anything, in a different country, you got to make the assumption, if you're going to be prudent, you got to make the assumption that you don't understand the culture. So you have to act on data and data only. Right. And that's it. So yeah. It's pretty interesting all the way around. They are not as equipped as the USA. Ugh, you make a lot of assumptions, bro. I've been in the Panhandle of Florida. I've been in the Black Hills of West Virginia. I've been in places in the United States that are way less equipped than places in Kenya. Like you gotta when you're dealing with business. I mean, if you just want to be on TikTok saying any old thing, fine, whatever. But when you're dealing with business and you're going to actually make a move, not talk about making a move, you have to have data, right? Not assumptions. Like you're going to kill yourself doing that. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot, right? We have an entire merger and acquisitions division, and the amount of due diligence that our lawyers have to do in order to do a merger or an acquisition, right? And the amount of data that you have to gather to make an actual legitimate decision is crazy. Any merger or acquisition that happens in less than 30 days, someone made an assumption somewhere. Someone did not do the proper due diligence. If it takes you less than 30 days to work through the mountains of data that you need to work through to make a proper decision, then somebody's not qualified. So again, like if you want to just play on the internet or whatever, just hear yourself talk or whatever, fine. That's what TikTokers do, right? They have these giant live sessions where they argue about nothing for 12 hours straight, fine, whatever. But if you're listening to this and you actually are going to make a legitimate business move, get rid of all assumptions. Just get rid of it. Get rid of it. Because what it'll really expose is how little you've been around, right? Like what it'll really expose is the 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 lack of reach in your actual professional history, right? And so that's one of the beautiful things about mergers and acquisitions is that you touch so many different places that you start realizing exactly how much you don't know, right? I was talking about the Black Hills of West Virginia. Go there yourself and you will see barefoot little white kids that have never had shoes in their life. Right? Right? They have no electricity, got no running water in the US of A, right? And so like that is a place that I would have never gone had it not been for like mergers and acquisitions pulling me there. That's a place I'm not even welcome. Don't go there if you're black, right? So there's so much to this world that you don't see unless you're forced to see it, that you can be sitting real comfortable and pretty in your assumptions and actually be dead wrong. And then you make the stupid decision of doubling down on your dead wrong assumptions instead of learning, and then it just proves exactly where your mindset's at, and then it ain't even worth talking, at that point. Then you just remove those people from your circle, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's never going to be helpful. It's never going to be helpful. It's because it's not even red teaming, right? Like we have an entire red team division. The red team gathers data to break the business decisions of the blue team, right? So the blue team they're setting up the business structure for the client. Maybe they're setting up the trust fund. Maybe they're setting up the offshore company. Maybe they're setting up whatever, right? So they're setting up whatever the client asks, to be set up and whatever they need. The red team acts like opposing lawyers trying to sue, trying to steal, trying to take, IP, whatever the case might be. So there's an entire team of lawyers looking for the gaps and the holes in the first team of lawyers' work, right? And they're trying to figure out, like, all right, if I wanted to steal this particular, trademark or this particular IP, how would I do it? Is there a way for me to do it? Right? But even that can't be based in assumptions. That has to be based in data and case law and all of those things, right? So going back to the person who got themselves in over $60,000 worth of trouble with the IRS for messing up their offshore trust, our red team had already seen exactly the problems that popped up that got that guy in trouble, right? And so that's why when you look at these things and when you're dealing with a specialist, you can get a second opinion, but you don't question the specialist. If you have the expertise to question the specialist, a real specialist, then you shouldn't have hired a specialist in the first place. Then you're the problem, right? When you hire a specialist, it's because you don't know. If you know, you should not be hiring a specialist. You should be leading the team. You only hire specialists to do things that you don't know how to do. That's it, right? You don't go to a doctor because you're a doctor and you can diagnose your own, illness, and you can run your own blood tests and then read the results yourself. What are you going to the doctor for? Right? Now, if you need a specialist, if you see some levels in the blood and you're not an oncologist and those levels in the blood test point out that there might be cancer, okay, now you go to the specialist. Because even as a doctor, that's something you don't know. That's what specialists are for. So if you're questioning anything other than the specialist's credentials, like if you're like, wait a minute, I don't think you are a specialist, that's different. Right? But if you know that they actually are a specialist and you're questioning the specialist, you're the problem. You got an issue, right? So now you got to decide, like, maybe you shouldn't even have what it is you're asking for, right? Or just go do it yourself and deal with the consequences, like homeboy is dealing with the IRS right now, right? So he's gonna have to come up with $60,000, or he's gonna have a real big headache. And he's a traveler, like obviously he's trying to do offshore stuff. Guess what happens if he doesn't pay the $60,000? They take his passport. Look it up. right? So all that traveling he be doing in the international businesses and all of that because he wanted to be hard headed and do it himself, he about to lose his passport unless he come up with 60 grand real quick, right? So if you're arguing with a specialist, you need to take a step back and figure it out. What am I arguing about? Am I arguing because he seems or they seem like they're not specialists? That's fair, right? If there's something that feels wrong, you get a second opinion. That's what you do with specialists. You go to another specialist and see what the second opinion is. If they both got the same opinion, stop. You're bugging, right? And then now you're tripping, right? You can get a third opinion if you want. You got money like that, right? But now it's obvious you're bugging, all right? So then you got to step back and decide, do I want it or not, right? Because now I'm playing with myself, right? Because what happens when you go against a specialist? You always lose. You go against a specialist, you always cut off your own nose to spite your face. Every time, right? Every time, as long as they're a real specialist. Every time, right? You don't do what the doctor says, you get that stroke, you get that diabetes, you get that whatever they told you was going to happen to you, you don't do what they said, that's what's coming for you, right? You don't do what the lawyer says, you're going to jail, right? Like that's it, right? So, just keep that in mind. That's how you learn. Also, you don't learn from dying from a heart attack, my friend. That's not how you learn. That's why you go to specialists, right? If you're learning something, it's a generalist. If you can survive learning it, I didn't say expert. I said a specialist. All right, you can be a general expert, and then you can. That's how you learn. I didn't say nothing about no experts. I said a specialist. If you are dealing with a specialist, you pay them and they tell you what to do. You go to a doctor, you pay the doctor, and the doctor tells you to go take the blood test. And then when you get the blood test back, the doctor tells you need a surgery. You don't walk into a doctor and say, do a brain hemisphere separation surgery on me, and he ain't did an MRI or a blood test and says, yes, do that, right? Experts are different. You can go learn with an expert. You can go disagree with an expert and whatever, right? That's different. If you are dealing with a specialist, right, you have to do what they say or else it's disaster, right? An architect is a specialist. If an architect says you need a supporting wall right there, and you say, you know what, screw you, I don't care, I'm paying you, don't put the support wall there, and the house fall on you and kill you, your wife, and your children, you didn't learn nothing, you just died. There's a difference between an expert and a specialist. You deal with a specialist, you do what they tell you to do, or else you cut off your nose to spite your face, period. There's no learning. It's going to end you when you're dealing with a specialist, because specialists are already at the highest level of consequence. That's why they're needed, right? Beneath the highest level of specialists lie experts, right? They're not at the highest level of consequence, right? So your doctors, specialists, lawyers, specialists, engineers, specialists, right? Not experts, specialists. Specialists are above expert, all right? So when you're dealing with your specialist, you do what the specialists tell you, or else, or you take what you get, right? And it is what it is, right? So to the question that led to all of this, if you're not a specialist, it doesn't behoove you to set up the structure in that way, because you may not know. If you're an expert, you may not actually know what is necessary even beyond the input of the general public, right? You might need the input of the general public in order to proceed, right? But if you are a specialist, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. You're right and they're wrong. End of story, right? If you are a specialist. Now, there might be multiple different specializations that overlap, which is where your second opinions come in, right? But if you know enough to be able to form the opinion, then you shouldn't need a specialist. You should be the specialist, right? So if you're arguing with a specialist, then that indicates that you yourself are a specialist and you actually made a mistake, right? By going ahead and engaging that person, right? You shouldn't have engaged them in the first place unless you were looking for a second opinion, in which case, what are you arguing about? You asked them for the second opinion, right? So if you're going head to head with a specialist, you're typically messing up, right? If you're getting a second opinion, you're just going to accept the second opinion and then hold it against whatever the initial opinion was, So if you're going head to head with a specialist, you're messing up. You got to step back and figure out what's going on, right? If you don't think they're a specialist, like I said, that's a credential check. That's a whole different thing. That's not you going head to head with their specialization. That's you trying to figure out whether they're a specialist at all. And there's something that's throwing you off, and you're feeling like maybe they're not who they say they are. All right, fine. Go ahead and do your credential check, right? But beyond that, once that's done and you know they are a specialist, you go ahead, you get your second opinion. At that point, that's when you're going to know, whether there's something off with the way that you're dealing with things, whether you need to take a step back or, give the reins to somebody else, or whether, you're actually dealing with an expert masquerading as a specialist. That's an expert to you, cool. Then let it be an expert to you. I'm not going to argue with you about that. Any expert will tell you that a specialist is above them. So, but if to you they're the same thing, then believe that. Yes, yeah, and then you're financially solvent the whole way through. Yes. Yep, you got it. Yep. No, you understand it fully. Yep, you got it, 100%. Because it's really easy. You see how basic it is? And I can tell by what you're saying, like you Google some stuff, like it's pretty basic. So that's what makes it kind of universal. Right. It's not even right. It's this particular strategy isn't even specialized. It's just a matter of access. It's just a matter of do you have access to those markets? Yeah. Well, are you eating? Look at you. You have to clean your face. Yeah. Clean this face. What are you eating? Oh, that sounds good. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yep. Now, so the problem is like we're on social media, right? So there's people that are just going to want to argue for the sake of arguing. That's not profitable to me. I don't care about that. You want to be right, you're right. Next. Right? If that's what you want to hear, you can hear it. Next. I'm never going to argue with anybody who, wants to just sit up on TikTok and argue. I don't care. That's not profitable to me. I'm talking to people who are ready to make a move. I'm talking to people who are movers and shakers. I'm talking to people who act more than they talk. And I'm not talking to them for very long, right? I got tons of shit to do, and I'm not gonna spend 12 hours on TikTok arguing about shit. Like you'll see in these live war rooms, right? So I'm not on for a very long time. I'm not on every day. I'm on, to discuss the things that I want to discuss. I'm not going to argue with nobody. They can believe whatever they want to believe, and I'm going to keep it moving. All right? It just doesn't make sense, right? It's literally a waste of my time. How much did you said that you just onboarded for a meeting. How much did you pay for the meeting? For that initial consultation? I did hear the phone go off, so I know that you weren't lying. How much did you pay for it? And how long is it? And that's discounted, right? So what's my effective hourly rate? Do the math. Right. So if that's my effective hourly rate, then why would I argue with anybody on TikTok? Right. So that's how you have to see those things, right? When there's people just talking nonsense, you got to figure out what your time is worth. And are you going to argue with them and waste your time dealing with them when you could effectively be in a initial consultation making your hourly rate, right? Right. So it all boils down to mindset. I see people get hung up on it, but it all boils down to mindset. Right, yeah, definitely. Now, bruh, I've shut down meetings. You know what I mean? But my kid needs me. I'm in a position, luckily, by the grace of all that is holy, that I'm able to do that. But the bond ladder helps with that. Like if I didn't have passive income guaranteed for the next 20 years pouring into my business, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? So like that's why we're talking exactly about what we're talking about, is that you have to be insulated from all of that to be able to operate in that way. But I mean, I could be in a merger acquisition meeting and my son needs me, then the meeting stops. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is, you know. But you gotta earn that. You know what I mean? You can't do that when you're hungry. So you gotta earn that. There are multiple ways to do it. The easiest way is the way I'm doing it right now, but that's not guaranteed. You know what I mean? That's good. That those interest rates are not sustainable, so they're not going to be around forever, right? So then when that disappears, how are you going to do it? What's the next way? You got to figure out the next way. Before this, we've only been able to do this for what, 4 years, maybe 5. So what did we do before that? We did prime contracting, right? Prime contracting wasn't as good because you always needed another contract, so you were still kind of on the hustle, right? But prime contracting at least allowed you to snatch up contracts and then subcontract the work to somebody else. So you made whatever your profit margin was. I think the highest margin we ever made was 28%. The lowest was 15, right? So we make 15 off the top. So if it was $1 million, then 150,000, would come off the top to us, and the majority, right, the overwhelming majority of the $1 million would go to the subcontractor because they need it to actually perform the work, right? And so, if you got a bunch of those going on, there's not a whole lot to manage, but if anything goes wrong, it's your fault, right? So you're still the contractor, so there is that. So you had some people, doing the work, but if they decided to cut up, it's your fault. So you had to deal with that. Then the bond rates got super duper competitive, and then that allowed us to do the bond ladders. Now the bond ladders last enough time that I'm not worried about anything, right? So I'll probably do my round of last ladders next year because that's when we think the bottom will drop out of it, right? So I'll do one more round. I'll try to do it as far out as 25 years and great. You know what I mean? If I get 25 years, we're talking about I'm 70 before the government stops paying. what? What are we talking about? Right? So the bond ladders are beautiful in that regard. And then your overage, you would just go ahead and invest whatever level of overage, right? So you have your runway. Your runway is what you spend for whatever the term of the runway is. I do monthly runways, right? So the monthly runway is what we estimate that you're going to spend, for that month. Your burn rate is what you actually spend, right? Down. We've been living here long enough that we kind of know what we're going to spend every month. So our runway and our burn rate are pretty close to each other. So anything beyond that, you just invest somewhere else. You know what I mean? You just invest in a different place and make it happen and go from there. So, once you got that down, you're good to go. You know what I mean? You don't have to really worry about much of anything. And if you got 25 years of those guaranteed payments coming in from the government, and then at the end of the 25 years, you get your principal back. It has less buying power by then, but you've already gotten the increase in buying power over, the maturity of the bond, right? So by the time everything comes out in the wash, if you don't have it worked out by then, I don't know what to tell you. You got 25 years of, passive income coming in, chunks of it tax exempt, guaranteed by a sovereign government, and then at the end of that 25 years, you got nothing to show for it. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? It doesn't get much easier than that, right? Your expenses should go down unless you're not healthy, right? Like if you get sick and like medical hits, at that point you're not lasting the 25 years, right? So it is what it is. But outside of that, your expenses should go down, right? So you should be making plans to make sure that you're okay when you come out of the 25 years of passive income. Oh, that's an intelligent question. Best practices. Real estate probably. Best practices are probably real estate, right? Because especially depending on how good your ladders are. Because if your ladders can cover the mortgage, then essentially you're breaking even until the mortgage is done. So if you do a 15-year mortgage and you got 25 years of guaranteed payments, right? So it just depends. It depends on how good your ladder is. Yeah. 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 No, that's a good way. Yeah, that's a smart way to look at it for sure. Yeah, you can. They don't have to be for the same amount. It depends. It depends on whether you're using it for business or you're using it to live. If you're using it for business, then you got to know what your burn rate is, or at the very minimum your runway. Like if the business isn't open yet, then whatever your runway is, which is your estimate, um, burn rate's going to be hard data, right? So burn rate's obviously better, but you got to know one of them. You got to know one of them in order to set it up so that you make that amount every month. You'll typically always make more because like our target's 10%, and the lowest we've ever gotten is 12. So if we're doing all our numbers based on 10%, you're actually going to make more, but that's okay, because there might be withholding taxes, which is 10% of the ROI. It's like a capital gains tax, right? So it's not 10% of the total, right? Because then you wash even. That doesn't make sense, right? So it's 10% of the payout. Now that's why those IFBs are so important, because if you have an IFB, there are no taxes. So like if the business is a local business, then it's the federal, like the IRS, and I'm assuming because you said that you must be American, but if it's a business and they're filing their business taxes, then there is no IRS unless they make a distribution to you. Shareholders don't have to get dividends, right? There are dividend stocks. Like even when you're dealing with the stock market, there are dividend stocks and historically non-dividend stocks, right? So just because you're a shareholder doesn't mean that you have to get paid a dividend. So as long as no money comes to you as an American, there is no IRS tax liability. If there's a foreign company that's making money in a foreign jurisdiction, it's paying its taxes in that jurisdiction. That's the end of it. See why it matters, and I don't know how long you've been here, but see why it matters whether or not you're a relocatee or not, because then the answers change, right? If you're not a relocatee, then the tax answers are different than if you are a relocatee. And see why it's like bullshit when somebody online gives you an exact answer for stuff like this, because there's no way they could possibly know. How do I know your exact tax situation? So how do I know what your tax liability is going to be, even on dividends? Because if you have a C corp already, right, which plenty of people have, if you have a C corp already and your C corp owns at least 10% of your offshore company, and it holds that 10% for at least 365 days, then the IRS says that you get the foreign dividend received deduction. The foreign dividend received deduction is up to 100%. So if you don't have a C corp or an LLC taxed as a C corp, are you going to get taxed on your distribution? Yes. If you do have a T corp, are you going to get taxed on your distribution? I don't know. It depends on whether or not you qualify for the foreign dividend received deduction. And if you do qualify for it, do you qualify for 100% dividend received deduction? If you do, then the money that you just sent, from your offshore company to your local company is 100% tax exempt by law under the IRS. Do you qualify for that? I don't know. Right? That's why, the people who are giving you straight answers on a place like TikTok are full of shit. There's no way they can know the answer to that unless they know your exact tax situation. It's not possible. And even if you start trying to tell me, I still don't know enough variables to actually be able to answer that. That's why when you sit down with a tax strategist, which by the way I'm not, I've just been doing this long enough to know a thing or two. But when you sit down with a tax strategist, it's a minimum 1 hour meeting. Now the follow-up meetings might be shorter, but it's a minimum 1 hour meeting. It's not something that you can give a couple of answers to on TikTok and like, oh, okay, I got it now. That means that you're gonna. It doesn't work that way, right? There's thousands of page of code in the United States tax code, right? Even a legit tax professional will tell you they haven't read it all. It's not possible, right? And so it's one of those things where that's why you need a solid tax strategist. You need a local tax person as well because there's a lot of local stuff, that nobody talks about. Because how could you? How are you going to make a TikTok video about something from Prince Edward County, Massachusetts or something like that? It's not going to make any sense, right? So there's a lot of local stuff that you never hear about because it only really matters to those local people, right? But you're going to need to know about if you got a rental property there or if that's where you live, right? You're going to need to know that local impact as well. So you need a local guy, you need a federal guy who understands the intersectionality of whatever the target country you're dealing with is, because there can be what's called a DTAA, a dual tax avoidance agreement, right? Where there's a treaty between the two countries that states you don't have to pay taxes to this country or that country, and here's how that works, right? These are the circumstances by which you don't have to pay, or if you've already paid this country, now you don't have to pay that country, or whatever the case may be, or 90% of what you paid this country, you now don't have to pay that country, right? Each treaty is different, but you're not going to know what it is until an expert tells you, right? So you need a tax expert. You might need a specialist that plans it all out, right? So like your planner is going to be a specialist, your filer is probably going to be an expert, right? And so those are the pieces of the puzzle, that you need that nobody talks about. And then you got some idiot on TikTok acting like, they know exactly what you need to do to not, pay taxes on this or, to waive, something on that and just run away. It's just nonsense. There's no way. It's not possible. You can have two people that have the same asset class making the exact same money in the exact same state, and their taxes are going to be completely different, 100% different. Yeah, no, that part is complicated. Absolutely, that's where the specialists come in, and the solution is going to be different for each one. Think of a lawyer. Two people got the same, case against them, or two people are trying to form the exact same thing. This lawyer has formed, 1,000 trusts, or has defended 1,000, criminals as a criminal defense attorney. He doesn't do the same defense twice, even though he might specialize in DUI. There are attorneys who specialize in DUI. It's not the same defense twice. Right? So it's when it comes to specializations, even if it's someone who says they have the exact same circumstances, you're not the same as them. It's not going to be exactly the same. There's going to be a nuance to you that doesn't exist with them. And if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't take the time to figure it out, you're screwing yourself over. That's where we get into that whole experts pretending to be specialists. Mm, you can typically there's no workaround, right? So typically it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert, and then you're looking at like another 10,000 to become a specialist, typically, right? So when you look at all the specializing programs and you count it all out, that's what it typically takes. So this is a significant amount of time. It could be like 12 years. They also charge a premium. That's like one of your first clues as to whether or not you're engaging a specialist is whether or not they're expensive. Right? It's like one of your first clues. You go to an oncologist, it's not the same as going to your regular doctor. That bill is different. That bill hits different. How about that? Yeah, well, and you typically don't have as many issues with specialists either, because typically a specialist will use their margin to solve problems. A generalist won't. An expert might, but a generalist won't. What's that? Like if you have a specialist build your house, right? It's like you have a specialized general contractor with specialized architect, and something goes wrong. They're not going to call you and be like, oh, the concrete honeycombed and compacted, and one of your load bearing walls isn't strong enough to hold up the facade of the house anymore, and so you're going to have to pay another $20,000 to recast the wall. Right? Like, right? That's not going to happen if you're dealing with a specialist. What they're going to do is they're going to look at the margin, right? The profit margin for the project that they charge you, and they're going to take $20,000 out of it and fix the wall, right? That's just the way that they're going to operate. So it's like it's a little bit different. Like yes, you pay a premium, but you also end up having like no problems and no like change orders, right? So like if a problem arises, they just handle it. Yeah, yeah. Well, so and the thing that people don't understand is you got to be able to afford to handle a problem, right? So if you're like a bargain, buyer, then you've never encountered that because you never paid anyone enough to be able to handle a problem. So every time there's a problem, your service provider calls you like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do," and you got to pay more to solve it because they can't afford to solve it, right? So that's the way that works. You get what you pay for. I mean, yes and no. That's typically not for like a third party problem, right? If you're a problem, will they just give you your money back and get rid? Absolutely. Absolutely. They will not tolerate your bullshit. That's true. But if there's like a third party problem, they won't run from the problem and just give you your money back and not solve it. They'll just solve the problem. There, there'll be problems that you never even knew happened. They'll just handle it, and that'll be the end. You won't even know there was a problem. We have a specialist, like our general contracting firm that we have with our vertical integration. They're specialists. They've paid vendors, like we just had one. We just had it happen, and I actually did a video on it. We had a vendor that stole the money for like the air conditioning and the windows and something else, right? So like they paid for it. The vendor like stole the money, ran to like Dubai or some shit, right? Right? They just reached into the margin and just fixed it. Like that was it. Like the client didn't have to pay extra for it or none of that. Like they made less, right? But that's what a specialist is going to do. They just reached into the margin and just fixed it. Like that was the end of it, right? They didn't even make a call. They didn't even like, oh, let me tell you how this person stole it. No, like they're taking them to court. They'll recover whatever they recover. It might take them some time to do so, but because they're specialists, they had the margin to fix the problem. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, so it is a mindset issue. A lot of people don't look at it that way, and that's why they have like lackluster help. You know what I mean? And you hear them complain about it all the time. They complain like everywhere they go and everything they do is always like an issue. You hear about it in the community. You're right. You're right. You hear about it a lot in the black community where they'll try to act like black owned businesses have this customer service issue, and it's not. It's the ones you're going like you're bottom of the barrel shopping. They don't have the margin to have customer service. Any little problem they can't afford to fix. And so they'll act like it's an industry issue when it's a them issue. It's their price buyer, and everything that they engage with is bottom of the barrel, but they expect top of the notch service when they're not paying for service at all. Right, right. And so it just is what it is. I don't encounter that. You I do a lot of business with black owned, and they charge a premium, and we pay that premium, and we never have a problem. And it just is what it is. So you definitely get what you pay for. Now, if we were to choose to pay to be a price buyer for some reason, then we don't care about the service. That's the point. Like if you choose to be a price buyer, you're choosing to not care about the service. Right? That's the point of being a price buyer. Is you don't care about nothing but the price. Right? So like it's just one of those things. uh, with acquisitions, it depends. So remember, even though we're an American company, everything we do is overseas, right? So I guess a good rule of thumb is like three times cash flow. So there's a pretty solid like rule of thumb, but it's so much more involved than that. It's so much more involved than that. Like your due diligence just to figure out like what's really going on with that company that you want to acquire. It's way more involved now because we're overseas. We do see a lot of acquisitions where the person doesn't care, right? What kind of acquisition would you think that is? It's a merger acquisition. Sometimes it's even a private equity acquisition, right? And they don't care. They don't care about any of the due diligence. They don't care about none of that. What kind of acquisition do you think that a stupid one. And no, not with us. Not if we kept them as clients. If they were being stupid, we'd be like, look, you don't want to do this. And if they push to do it, we're dropping them. But that's a good answer. It's typically a citizenship by investment acquisition. So there are countries that will give you a passport if you purchase a business of a certain dollar amount. So all they care about is purchasing. Sometimes it even has to have so many employees. So sometimes it'll be like the purchase has to be $250,000 and it has to employ 10 local citizens, right? So we have a lot of passport portfolio clients, and those are typically generational wealth clients. Like we don't typically have standalone passport portfolio clients. Like they're doing their generational wealth, work, and part of that are passport portfolios for their family, right? And so for them, they don't necessarily care about this one-off investment because that one-off investment gives them access to the capital markets associated with that jurisdiction. And so they'll acquire, the company to meet the criteria to get the passport. And so they don't care. All they care about is that it meets the criteria. You get that in the US a lot as well because there is, it used to be, what was it? $1 million in 10 jobs, I think. I know Trump has a gold card now, and there's different things now. But before, when the country was sane, there was a way to get a green card. Citizenship was never for sale in the United States, but you could get permanent residency by investment, and you can get a green card by investing like $1 million into a company that did at least 10 jobs, which was actually really hard to do, right? Like typically $1 million wouldn't even get you 10 jobs, right? And so what would end up happening is they'd have these things called regional centers. And then companies like Hilton would raise money through these regional centers because these guys don't care. They don't care if they make money or not. They're buying a green card, right? So if you dumped $1 million into a new hotel, that hotel through the cleaning staff and the bellhops and the front desk and all that, you were going to be guaranteeing yourself 10 jobs, right? And that $1 million could get thrown into that pot. And then Hilton might even make you a return over time or something like that. So Hilton, Marriott, these types of companies, they used to raise money in these regional centers from these people. And then the regional center had everything else, right? So they had the specialists there where you could just invest in that regional center, and there were lawyers set up and all of that that would dot all the I's and cross all the T's to make sure that you got this green card, right? And of course, the million was the investment. So you had to pay something else for the regional center services, right? That could be, hell, could be another million, quite frankly, right? So you made this payment, you got your U.S. green card. That was then. This is now. There are all kind of crazy stuff going on now. But there are countries where you could do the same thing. Some places you could just buy property, but even then, the property had to be a certain amount, right? Typically 300,000 and above, right? So you had to buy a $300,000 house, not just the house. But the business thing, obviously, there was at least a chance there that you might make your money back. So that was a little bit more popular, but it had to be a certain price. So in that situation, they might do an acquisition of a company that's not worth that price and charge that price anyway, just to get that citizenship by investment, right? So that's the exception that proves the rule there. Those clients will sometimes overpay in order to get an ancillary benefit. There are some countries where like you can't do that. Like the country has to come in and value the business. So no, they're not mine. That's the neighbor's dogs. I didn't realize you could hear them though. I think there is a setting. I think I can turn off like a diminished background noise setting or something like that. No, they're not better. No, don't do that. That's not what I'm saying at all. A specialist is not better than a generalist. That's not true. Generalists have their place in economy, and so do specialists. But if you have a specialist, it means that you got a problem, right? Or no, it does mean you got a problem. All business is solving problems, right? So if you have a specialist, it means that you have a problem that you cannot solve, and that you're paying somebody to tell you what to do to solve it. So you need to do what they tell you. That's where most people screw up specialists. It's like the easy. I use doctors because it's easy. It's like you die, do what they tell you to do, or you're dead. Right? So like that's why I use doctors as examples so often because it's real. It's an easy example, right? But sometimes it's like bodyguard, right? You don't pay $1 million bodyguard or an executive protection specialist if someone's not trying to take you out. Like you don't make that investment if there's not a risk coming at you, right? But then how does the bodyguard, save your life? You have to tell the bodyguard everything to do, and the bodyguard creates a plan. Oh, you want to go to the mall? Okay, we're going to have a decoy car drive this way. We're going to drive that way. We're all going to be wearing the same suit. If something happens, everybody pulls their suit up over their head, and we all, scatter. And now nobody knows who the real guy is to take them out. Like you got to do what the bodyguard tell you to do, or else you're done. That's a specialist. You're paying him, but he doesn't listen to you. You listen to him, or else you're done. Right? So when you get a specialist, you're at the top of the problem, right? And you need somebody at the top to solve it, right? So that's your difference. Yeah, the easiest difference is if you're trying to figure out what you're dealing with, the easiest difference is am I listening to the person I'm paying or is the person I'm paying listening to me? If the person you're paying is listening to you, they're a generalist. If you're listening to the person you're paying, they're a specialist. That's essentially it. Can you listen to a generalist? Yes. And if listening to them does not completely fuck you up, then you did not have a problem big enough to have a specialist. If you don't listen to the specialist, you're screwed. If you don't listen to the person and like nothing really happens, then they were a generalist or an expert pretending that they were a specialist. Experts are like in the middle. Yeah, so like if you're thinking about like a lawyer, right? Then the paralegal is an expert. So if you don't do what the paralegal says, like you're not necessarily going to jail, right? But if you don't do what the lawyer says, maybe you are, right? So the paralegal is helpful, you know what I mean? But it's the lawyer who's going to carry you through. I don't know. People, I don't know. I think people don't like to have to people, so people always want to like argue and find loopholes with specialists and all of that. It's a waste of time. Like I'm definitely not going to argue with them because it's an exercise in futility, right? Because the only reason you're arguing is because you're not in the position. If somebody was trying to take your life, you would not be arguing about whether a bodyguard was a specialist or not. You'd be doing whatever the hell they told you. And you know what I mean? Like if you were having a heart attack and the, the the cardiothoracic surgeon was trying to put the nitro under your tongue, you wouldn't argue with them about whether or not to open your mouth and put the nitro pill under your tongue, right? So the exercise of arguing about whether you listen to a specialist or not comes from a place of not needing a specialist. Right? If you were in a situation right now where you needed that specialist, you do exactly what the hell they told you to do. So, it just is what it is. Right. It's a total waste of time, especially if your time is valuable. You're not finna waste it that way. You're probably correct, but that's because you believe that. Everyone's time is valuable, but only because you believe it. Now, some people say it and they don't actually believe it, but you're right. We actually respect the client's time as much as we respect our own because we assume their time is as valuable, if not more valuable than ours, right? That's the assumption. So we'll like stop a meeting, as soon as we figure out like, oh, we're not a good fit. You know what? We're not the best, provider for you. You're not gonna, do well by dealing with us. Just, that's the end of that. Like we're not gonna waste any more of your time. But some of those things are based on like your mindset. Yeah, like if you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Right. So if you believe you can do it, you're right. If you believe you can't do it, you're right. There's no need to argue. Yeah. All right. Everybody get that? Everybody figure it all out? We went on a couple tangents, didn't we? Ooh. Right. So bond ladders in a location where your original currency is way overvalued in comparison, and the rate of return, what's called a coupon payment on that bond, is better than the S&P 500. Sure, you can have. Well, you might not have access to actually, get the bonds on your own, but yes, you can do them anywhere you want. It's not really a specialist activity. We happen to be a specialist firm, but this is so simple that it's not. And that's the other thing. Specialists won't lie about specialist activities. You know what I'm saying? Like going to get the blood drawn at the lab is not a specialist activity. You know what I mean? You can go to any lab you want. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just that you can't use our calculations because those broker fees are probably higher because they're brokers. They do brokerage activities, right? We're not. We're a relocation firm. We have a generational wealth vision as well, right? When we relocate people, they need a place to live,
right? When people, relocate, they need a way to earn money. So we have vertical integration. We own our own architecture firm, we own our own GC firm, general contractor firm, right? And we have ways that our people can make money. So for us, that's not our main business, right? So that's why when people are like, "Oh, I'll just go to a broker and buy the bond," they go to a broker and it's twice as expensive because that's what they do, right? It's not a side effect of what they do, right? So, but yeah, I mean, and you might find a broker that's cheaper. Go for it. You know what I mean? But for us, it's a vertical integration of what we do, right? So generational wealth people don't necessarily relocate, right? So for those people, their bond structure is a bit different. Relocatees that want to off the bond payments, that structure is also different, right? Because you need enough money coming in that it does actually cover, right? If you don't have enough money coming in to actually cover your life, it gotta be practical. I mean, we're not, for us, our clients are typically long term no matter what, right? And so typically, if a client relocates over here, it's 7 years until dual citizenship. So we're with them at least 7 years, right? And then the dual citizen process itself is like an additional year, right? So 7, 8 years we're with the minimum, right? With generational wealth, it's essentially for life because generational wealth is perpetual, right? So the things we do are not wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Like, oh great, you paid once and I never have to see you again. The things that we do are now we're together for a long time. So if we set you up for failure, it's going to come back and bite us in the ass, right? Like we can't. It doesn't work that way. So there's a bit of a difference there. Yeah, no, you're right. A lot of the like relocation coaches and like the less specialized relocation people, yeah, they just take your money and like maybe get you an apartment or you're on your own. But for us, that doesn't make sense. For us, we'd rather carry you all the way to dual citizenship. Why? Actually, it's a bit self-serving, right? So, like, imagine we've set up all these people with bonds, right? Now they don't have to work again another day in their life. They can live here. They're free, right? Living here. They don't have to worry about being shot by police or anything like that. They're good, right? And now, 5 years from now, we want to build a hospital. Who do you think our investment pool is going to be? There's a bunch of people that we know that are being paid for life. They've settled in to the amount of money that they make per month, and now they're living below their means. So not only do they not have to work and they have passive income coming in for the next 20 years, but they also have an overage, right? So they have income above what they need to live that they've been stacking for the last five of those 20 years. Who do you think we're going to for our investor pool? Who do you think is going to say no if we screwed them over and set them up for failure? Who do you think is going to say yes and give us that money that we need to build that hospital if we didn't set them up for failure? Right? So it's one of those things where, it's self-serving to do business well, right? Because then, we do have a school in the back of our mind, and we do have a hospital in the back of our mind, right? And so we're going to want investors in on that. So we're going to want people who have seen that we made them money. We're going to want people who have seen that we gave them a softer life, right? And who are now in a position to actually go ahead and invest in that and be equity stakeholders in that, and right. So that's down the road. But if you're a relocation coach, right, you're just trying to make a quick $2,000 or $3,000 in somebody, you don't have those kinds of long-term goals in mind. There's nothing holding you to doing business properly with them and making sure that you serve them properly, so that down the road, you have you know, a solid group of people to reach into, and let them know that there's a solid investment opportunity coming, and that they've seen your work. Like they trust that, yeah, okay. They say it's a solid investment opportunity coming. It's probably a solid investment opportunity coming, right? And it made me all this money so far. They probably make me some more money in the future, right? So that's what it's about. It's not all altruistic or anything like that. It makes sense to do good business, that's all. Most business people actually think so, by the way. In case you didn't know that secret, 90% of our business is referrals. Yeah, I mean, we're on social media just like everybody else, but 90% of our business is referrals. There are a few. There are a few. If you go to YouTube, there are a few like people who chose to be seen. You know what it is that because of the law firm aspect of what we do, um, that protection, that attorney-client privilege locks in. So we can't be showing videos like some of these other people can show videos all day and all night. I had an initial consultation just the other day, right? And I'm talking really brilliant, super cool, you know, lady wants some really nice like trust stuff set up. Like she already has some stuff going on. She understands what it is. She knows what she wants, right? But she didn't come from a referral, right? So she's one of the 10% that come in off of. I think she actually came from TikTok. She might have been the first. TikTokers are pretty much all talk, right? So YouTuber different situation, but TikTokers. So like might have been the first real person from TikTok that came through. And she was like, "Oh, do you have some references?" And we do. We have some people who have agreed and have signed that they will allow for their identity to be known, because these are people who are setting up international trust funds. They don't want us telling the world where their money is, right? But because it's so difficult, we require that if you want us to put you with those people, you also have to sign a release. And the next person who asks, hey, you have, a referral. Can we get a referral? You got to now be the referral along with the other people who have signed the release. 90% of the people are like, no, I don't really need the referral. It's like a chat GPT question. Ask them for a referral. Okay, cool. You got to be the next referral though. Oh, no. I want attorney-client privilege. Well, everybody else does too. Right? So, but if you go to our YouTube, there are a few clients that are on there that have done interviews or whatever. But it ain't standard. Standard, it's I don't want nobody to know where my money at. You know, you got international trust funds for a reason, so that people don't know where the crown jewels are, and so you know. But yes, you can go there and hear some conversations with some folks. Yeah, when it comes down to that, we just don't have any bad reviews, so that's almost just as important, isn't it? Right? Like you go to our Google reviews and all of that, and check out all of that stuff. There's no negative reviews. I think somebody tried that once. Like somebody was just being spiteful, and I guess Google caught it because they were like, "What?" And they removed it. Like I guess they weren't even in the right country or like whatever Google's criteria was. Like somebody tried to do a fake whatever, and they like immediately removed it. We didn't even talk to them about it. They were just like, "No, this isn't actually real." So people are miserable sometimes. I would never, like, my time's way too valuable for me to like go find somebody's thing and try to do a fake. Like what? Whatever. No, they're not mosquitoes. They're ants, which is weird because it rained this morning. But that's a pretty big freaking delay. But yeah, they're winged ants. They come out every time it rains. All right, so do we got it? We get it. We're good. We understand how to immediately be financially free if we're going to relocate and live our best lives in Kenya. We all get it. YouTube, you got it. TikTok, you got it. We're good. My message for the night is cutting through.
All right, solid. It's been 2 hours. I always spend 2 hours on this goddamn thing, right? I need to stop spending that much time on this thing. All right, that's like $1,000 worth of my time. In initial consultations, non-initial consultations cost more. So it's been 2 hours. I'm done. I think y'all got everything you need. If you got it, if you have a question, feel free to ask it. Don't be afraid to ask. But I think we're good. I think everybody got what they wanted. Everybody asked the questions they wanted to ask. YouTube, you guys have been killing it today. Normally TikTok talks more, but YouTube has been on it. Yeah, I guess it is early, huh? Obviously here it's not, but East Coast, I guess it is. All right, we're good? We're good? We're good. All right, Freedom Family. Talk to you guys later. Have a good one.